I never really thought of myself as a singer until I started college. And one of the ways that that happened is my father called, you know, a lot of the men from the community, and they had a small ceremony for me in the back of our house, and brought me into the drum in a formal fashion. You know, and with that, all of a sudden, you know, what seemed to overcome with, or at least emotionally, or at least in my heart, was the sense that now I've been given a gift, and it's a responsibility for me to study it, and to you know, enhance it and make it the best that I can to the best of my ability. Now that didn't come by easy means, unfortunately. I went to Dartmouth College initially, and while you know I'd earned my way there, definitely I was non arts and humanities leaning at all. I was really focused on you know, science and engineering when I first got there. But when I left Dartmouth, I did drop out. You know, coming from the reservation and going to the Ivy Leagues can be a difficult transition, and it was for me. So I did drop out. But when I left, I was working on Native American studies. And when I did leave, I joined the Mystic River Singers, which is a powwow drum group, which is not, powwow is not traditional to Passamaquoddy or Wabanaki music whatsoever. It's in fact a completely opposite beat pattern. But if you know powwow music, and you've seen a really good group of singers, especially if you've seen them live, you know how good the music is and how much it just gets into your heart. And I became addicted to it. And so while at Dartmouth, we started a drum group, an intertribal drum group, Occompon Singers. And from there, I went to the Mystic River Singers, which are based out of Connecticut, made up of tribal singers from all over the US and Canada at the time. I got to learn from some of the best in powwow country. Bill Runs Above, you know, Jack Bull, and Kenny Merrick Sr., as well as Kenny Merrick Jr. And Kenny Merrick Jr. was our lead singer. And from that time, I traveled with Mystic River Singers for a couple of decades, you know, really learning, you know, how to use my voice, how to, you know, really get it down, especially singing in a group or and then singing by yourself, and spending time in tribal communities all over the US and Canada as we were traveling, and paying attention to their own music traditions. And I would also pay attention to how those community leaders and the elders that we were learning from would speak to outsiders from their community, because I'm you know, not all natives are the same. You know, so I'm an outsider to their community, how they would be teaching me about their music. And I would absorb that as well into my own pedagogical methods. And so, you know, music for me was really a big part of healing. You know, leaving the reservation and coming out into America, I did not know where I fit in America. And where I found my place initially was with music.
How do we create something that will cause transformation? We know the power is in there with music. If we do it right, with the right heart, then something can happen.
The senior producer from the office of Yo-Yo Ma, she was looking to have a meeting with me and, you know, let me in on the fact that Yo-Yo was coming to Acadia National Park in Maine, and was going to do pop-up performances there, and also let me know that Yo-Yo is going, you know, Yo-Yo is always exploring, you know, the music, humanity, you know, the crossroads and all of those types of things. And he really wants to tie music and nature together. And by doing so, he wanted to make sure to include Indigenous voices. And once again, our languages come from what we call in English nature, right? You know, the landscape itself. So if you're going to do something that involves nature, to have Indigenous voices there is only proper, right? And he was doing that in that fashion. And so that's why I was contacted initially to see if I could set up something, right? You know, like what, and so the question was you know, posed to me, what would be meaningful for Yo-Yo Ma to do in Wabanaki homelands that would be meaningful to Wabanaki people? Right. So that's a great question. We're not centering the English speaking world. We're centering, the indigenous world, the Wabanaki people in our own homelands. That's what he was doing with that question. And so I put out something that I thought to them would sound a little crazy, and I never thought that they would go for it. You see all the pictures in back me, and I've mentioned multiple times Dawnland, right? Passamaquoddy people are part of a larger group of tribes that are known in English as Wabanaki, which translates to the people of the dawn. Our ancestors knew our geographical, area, that we are in the part of the country that sees the sunrise first. And as part of our cosmology, I was brought up with the cosmology that it's our duty as Wabanaki people to greet the sun, to welcome the day every morning so that the rest of the country will have sun for the day. So that's, part of, what we do. And so I as a young man, traveling through Wabanaki territory, I would take part in ceremonies. And one of those ceremonies is the sunrise ceremony. It's literally, the purpose of it is to sing continuously through the moment of sunrise, as the sun, right before the sun first peaks, its first rays come through, and as the sun rises through, as a way to greet the sun in a formal fashion. And there's stories that go back, that reiterate for us how important it is for us to do that. So I said to Yo-Yo Ma's crew, I said, well, if you really wanted to do something meaningful to Wabanaki people, then do a performance on the coast at sunrise. To my surprise, not only did they say yes, but they were extremely excited about the prospect of this idea and how it could work out. And so the partnership was made from there. I ended up meeting with Yo-Yo's crew, and also I brought together two collaborators from my home communities, Lauren Stevens, an awesome young singer, and Roger Paul, who's a linguist and storyteller, to collaborate on creating this sunrise pop-up performance. That's initially what it was going to be. And so we worked on it together, and really, to Yo-Yo Ma's credit, Yo-Yo Ma's handed over the keys of how to put this performance together to us, to myself and to Roger and Lauren. And we really drove, the creation of this performance. And it was a mixture, right? And we really built it on the idea of guest and host. Right, Yo-Yo is a guest in Wabanaki homelands, and we were welcoming him as a good host, right? So we're being good hosts, and he's being a good guest. And so the performance begins with Wabanaki performers, other ones that we brought in, welcoming the day with music. And so we start with flute music and other things. But as we work through the performance, eventually Yo-Yo, joins us as we're performing a welcome song. And takes over the vocal part, on the strings, which is, a beautiful moment, and a really awesome way to welcome him into the performance. So that was so important. Once again, my father, being the language advocate that he has been over all this time, I, of course, turned to him for advice in the creation of this performance. And one of the first things he said to me was, "You're going to include our language, right?" And I said, of course, that's one of the reasons why Roger Paul is in there, so that the whole performance actually begins with a story all in Passamaquoddy, and it's not translated until the end, so that all of the people that are watching kind of go through a journey on their own, right? Where of not understanding the words at the beginning, but having this journey of music, and then at the end having the translation come to them of what the story was about and why we were there. It turned out to be almost like a lightning strike of energy, a lightning bolt of energy that hit us. In that, things really started to, maybe it's the world really needed this. The idea behind this was it's, the pandemic we thought was winding down at the time when we were putting this together. The world but we definitely need, saw that the world needs to come together somehow, some way, heal, right? And so we really, all of us, the Wabanaki performers, Roger, Lauren, and Hawk and Rolf and Matt, as well as Yo-Yo Ma, we're really trying to come together to put our energies together to see if we could do something good for the world.